In this video, we're going to install the feed dogs and set the height, as well as install the presser bar and set the height of the presser foot on your Singer Featherweight. So first, let's go over the parts that you will need to reinstall the feed dogs and the needle plate. This is the actual feed dogs, and you should have cleaned them out really well. Sometimes you can get a lot of lint mixed with oil. It really can pack in between the teeth, so make sure you clean those out really well. There are 2 screws that hold the feed dogs down on the machine, and then we have a needle plate and 2 screws for the needle plate. So first we'll install the feed dogs themselves. So it's going to help if you have a screwdriver that's going to allow you to work in a really low clearance area, because between the needle bar and the nose of the machine, you have the tendency to run into this upper portion with your screwdriver. So I love a little tool like this. You do want to oil the threaded ends of these screws. I'm just putting a little bit of oil on each one. It doesn't matter which screw goes in which hole. So what we're going to do is place the feed dogs down onto this little bar right here where we have these 2 screw holes. And it has to go with the feed dogs coming towards you. Then you just put both screws in. They are right to tighten, and if you can start them with your fingers, that's probably the easiest way. And I just get both of them started before I actually tighten them down. And I normally get them both fairly screwed in, and then I finish up tightening them just to make sure that everything is situated properly. And these are screws that when I'm totally finished with the restoration, I like to go back and just make sure that they're good and tight. Sometimes if I have something to fix, I may end up taking the feed dogs off again. So now that we have the feed dogs on, we can put the needle plate on. And the needle plate just fits right into the cutout in the bed of the machine. And these screws are the same as the feed dog screws. It doesn't matter which one goes in which hole. And they're normally pretty easy to start with your fingers. And let's secure these all the way down, because before we get to the presser bar, which we're also going to do, we want to check the height of the feed dogs. And that's nice and tight. Okay, so checking the height of the feed dogs. What that means is when we are running our machine, our feed dogs are going to move. They're going to go back, they're going to drop down, and then they're going to come forward and back up and catch that fabric and pull it back. So they have a recommended height by Singer, and it is 0.040 inches. That is the proper height of the feed dog. So that's what I want to set it to. Now I use a feeler gauge. I have 2 here. This one is 0.025 and 0.015, which equals 0.040. If you don't have these, I'm going to show you another way to set the height just by looking at it. That's going to be pretty accurate. Now, once you have this needle plate on, I want you to do a little test. Turn your hand wheel and set your stitch length at about a 10. And just watch the feed dogs and see if when you spin your hand wheel, if they are bumping any part of the needle plate, either meaning they're too far to the right or the left, or they're coming too far forward or backward. Then lower your stitch length regulator to the longest stitch length, all the way to 6, and run it again. What I'm looking for is just before I set the height, I'm checking to make sure that the actual feed dogs themselves are not off in position as far as how far forward they come or how far backwards, or if they're just a little bit too far to one side. Those settings can get messed up. It's not normal to find that, but if you did something where you took out extra parts in the bottom of the machine, you could run into that problem. So at the longest stitch length, it's not hitting the needle plate. At the shortest stitch length, it's not. And in reverse, it's not hitting the needle plate. So I know I don't need to make any adjustments to the feed dogs other than check the height. So now let's get started with that, and go ahead and set your stitch length at about an 8 or a 10 for when we do this step. Okay, so I've tried to get you kind of as dead on as I can here on the feed dogs. So when you're checking the feed dog height, what you're going to do is you're going to rotate your hand wheel towards you, and you're going to watch your feed dogs as they come up and find that highest position of when they seem like they're up the highest before they start to go back down again. So when I'm watching my feed dogs, I would say right here is the highest position. So when I check the height of the feed dogs, that's where a feeler gauge comes in handy. I can lay that right up against my feed dogs, and I'm pressing them up, and I'm running my finger over the feeler gauge onto the feed dog. And I want to see if I feel like a little bit of a drop off or a transition where my feed dogs are lower or higher. And in this case, these feed dogs to me feel too low. So I have my feeler gauges up against the side of the feed dogs where I feel like they are at their highest point, and in the front I'm going to expect more of a little drop off, but right here in the back is where I want to feel that it's even. And actually I still think they're a little bit low. So these feed dogs need to be adjusted. If you didn't have a feeler gauge and you were just trying to do this by sight, I'm going to show you what to look for. We're back at this angle where you can see the feed dog a little bit more. And when the feed dogs come up, they make a V shape like this. If you were setting the height by eye, what you would want to see is when they are at their highest point, that V shape, the low part of the V shape, would be about level with your needle plate. That's a great way to eyeball it. You don't want to see where the feed dog makes a complete V and then you're seeing the rest of the feed dog underneath the V showing over the top of your needle plate. But if you can line it up so that that bottom of the V in the feed dog is flush with your needle plate, you've done a good job setting the height. This one we have to adjust. So now we're looking underneath the machine, and that's because the adjustment to set the height of the feed dog is actually done down here. There is an eccentric screw. It's right here, and you can access it from a hole in the side of the machine. On the end is a little nut, and first you're going to need to loosen that nut. So that means you're going to wish you had 4 hands, but you need to put your screwdriver into this hole and then loosen this nut. So hold the head of the screw still and use your wrench and pull up towards the ceiling to loosen the nut. Once it's loose, then this screw should freely turn. And that actually right now, even though you can't see it, is raising and lowering the feed dogs. I'm going to show you real quick if I can do this with my fingers. So here they are at their highest setting right there. If I grab that screw head, I can't see it. There we go. If I grab it, watch. I'm just turning the head of that screw. Do you see them disappear? Turn it again, they come back up. Turn it again, the other way, they come back down. So I'm actually adjusting the height of the feed dogs by turning the head of that screw. So what we'll do is while that screw is loose, you'll turn your hand wheel so that your feed dogs are at the highest point, which is about right there. Then, so I'm going to turn the screw with my fingers and watch those feed dogs raise until I feel like they're at the right height. I'm using my feeler gauge that's actually a little bit high. I'm going to lower them a little bit. That feels good. So it's going to be, funny angles, but you can do it. Now, when I have the feed dog set at the proper height, I'm going to use my screwdriver to hold that screw in the position that it needs to be in, and I'm going to tighten that nut back down. So I'm turning the hand wheel. I'm watching the feed dogs come up to their highest point, which is right about there. Then I'm going to grab my feeler gauges, and I'm just running my fingers over. That feels good. And you kind of want to check towards the back or in the middle. But now my finger runs smoothly from the tooth, the high point of the tooth on the feed dog, to the feeler gauge. So I'm comfortable with the height of these feed dogs. And I've made sure that I tightened down that little nut when I was done, so that's not going to spin out of place and then my feed dog height is messed up again. So we set the height of the feed dogs. Now we can install the presser bar. So to install your presser bar, you need your presser bar. You also need this thumb screw. This is what's going to put tension on the presser bar after it's all installed. So when we want more pressure on the presser foot, we'll tighten this down. When we want less, we will loosen it. So you're going to need that. The spring for the presser bar, this guide bracket, and this is what the presser bar slides through. And then using this little set screw, which you'll also need, we're going to clamp this guide bracket onto the presser bar at a certain spot. That's how we set the height of the presser foot. This is the thread cutter, and I will put it back on the presser bar once I have it installed, but some people like them, some people don't. Whether you decide to leave the thread cutter or not is up to you. And then this is the tension pin releasing lever, and we're going to install it at the end just to make sure that our presser bar is working properly. When we raise and lower it, it works with this tension pin releasing lever, so we want to see them all work together. Now there's one more thing you'll need. That's your presser foot, because when we set the height of the presser bar, we need to do that with the presser foot on the machine. So let's do the next step and install the presser bar. So you have more parts that you're going to want to oil, and that is the presser bar itself. Then you're going to want to oil right here. This is one spot where the presser bar is going to go through, and then also right here, another spot that the presser bar is going to go through. You're also going to want to take your guide bracket and oil this little finger part and oil inside the hole where the presser bar is going to slide through. You just want that really lubricated. And finally, a nice coat of oil on the spring. You can go all the way up if you want, but just put a nice coat of oil. So first thing we're going to do is actually not put the presser bar in. We're going to start with this guide bracket. Okay, the way that it goes in the machine, you might need to move your needle bar a little bit, get it out of the way, is on the back of the machine you can see there's a cutout right here. So this little finger is going to fit in that cutout. And the hole that we're going to put that set screw in to lock the presser bar into place is going to face you. So the finger is going to go out towards the back and the hole is going to face you. And it's just going to slide right into that cutout, just like this. And it should move up and down freely. If you notice that it gets stuck at a certain point, then stop and really clean out that cutout. Make sure that there's no debris in there. You can even take a piece of fine sandpaper and kind of run it back and forth, feed it through the cutout and kind of sand both sides if you need to. And then check the guide bracket itself on the finger and make sure you don't have any damage that would be causing it to stick. But it should just easily slide into that cutout. And it is a little bit difficult working around the needle bar, but it's not really too much trouble. Now that we have the guide bracket in place, we can go ahead and slide our presser bar in. And that's going to go through this hole up here on the top at the back of the machine. It should just slide right down into that hole, then down through this hole in the body of the machine, and then you're going to want to line up your guide bracket so that it can slide through that too. Whoop, kind of slid down on me, I had to grab it. Now we have the presser bar back inside the machine, and all we're going to do is we're going to take this spring and drop it through the top hole down inside the presser bar. So now we have the spring and the presser bar together, and then we're going to take our thumb screw and we're just going to get it started. I don't want a ton of pressure, but I do need to set the height of the presser foot, so I am going to appreciate a little bit of resistance with this spring, but you can figure out how much is workable for you. So I just have very little pressure on here. Now, before I install the foot on the machine, I'm going to work my thread cutter back on. And I always put it on with this cut side pointing down. And you have to look really close, but one of these sides, I wouldn't say they're razor sharp, but they're definitely sharp. They were meant to cut thread. So that part is what is pointing down. So when you slide it on, you need to be careful to not be pushing on that part where you're going to stick yourself. And you can only put this on after you've got the presser bar through all of the holes. So, and it's just a little bit of wiggling, and I normally hold the presser bar and grab the thread cutter and just kind of wiggle and twist and pull up. And at this point, it's all the way on. Now it's just a matter of getting it up further on the presser bar without pushing on that. So if you wanted to, you could take something like a little rag, something to just protect your fingers, and use that to push up. And now we can spin this around in place, but it's back on, and I can go ahead and attach my foot. Before we stick that foot on, let's go ahead and put the tension pin releasing lever on. And I want you to look at this, because this is held on with a hinge screw. It's going to go in and fit, like sit flush right here. It's going to screw into this hole. You just set this on the machine, and this is what's going to work with the presser bar to add tension or release the tension on your tension assembly. So I like to put a little bit of oil here and then Just add the screw. The spring is facing the front of the machine. I don't think you'll really be able to put this on any other way. And then when you screw it down, you want to make sure that this screw is actually going into that hole on the tension pin releasing lever. So it's tightened all the way down and you don't have any little gaps right here. Now that we've done that, watch this. I don't have my tension in, but do you see that? When I raise my presser bar, that moves forward. When we have the tension assembly in, the little tension pin in the stud is going to stick all the way through the machine out the back, and this will put pressure on it and move it forward and relieve the pressure on the tension disc. And then when you lower it and you go to sew, it will pull back and the tension will push back onto your thread at whatever setting you have set. So all of this is in. Now we can put the foot on the machine and actually set the height of our presser bar. And I didn't tell you to grab your thumb screw for your foot, but you will need that. I find it's easy sometimes to just start that thumb screw a little bit and then kind of work the foot around onto the presser foot. But I want that on. To set the height of my presser foot, Singer said to set the presser foot height at 5/16 of an inch. So the easiest way for me to do this, I have two ways. If you shop at the Featherweight Shop, they have this little tool that you can use to set the height of your presser foot and also make sure that it's straight. I'm not going to use that today. Instead, I'm going to use 4/4 because I know everyone will hopefully have 4/4, and again, my feeler gauges. So with these 4/4, if I take my gauge here and I start looking, see if you can see what it says. I'm going to use the one that says 0.45 millimeters or 0.018 inches plus the 0.48 millimeters or 0.019 inches. I'm going to use these two together with 4/4 to set the height of this, and that's going to put me as close to 5/16 of an inch as possible. So I'm raising my presser foot and I'm sliding the 4/4 under first, and then I'm adding my 2 feeler gauges. So this is how high my presser foot will come up when I raise it. Now I'm checking to make sure that I have the lever and everything lined up correctly right in here. Not like this where there's a gap, but more like that. Then I'm going to eyeball the foot and try to, just using my eyes, make it sit straight on the needle plate. So the goal is then that the hole in the forked part of the foot is going to line up perfectly with the hole for the needle in the needle plate. When I feel like it's pretty close, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the set screw onto my presser bar. And one more time, I'm checking to make sure that I like how this guide bracket is meeting the lever inside. And then I'm going to tighten it down. I'm just going to turn it this way so I can reach it. So I want to fully tighten down the set screw now. Nice and tight. Now it's time to check my work. So I'm going to remove my quarters. And first, I'm just going to see how this works. And it feels a little floppy, but that's only because I need to add a little bit of pressure on that thumb screw up there now. But look at that. Everything's working properly. Even if I tighten this down considerably, my presser bar stays up when I have it raised. So Did I do a good job on making it straight? Well, let's look. I'm raising it and lowering it. And I'm actually not just looking at the hole here, but I'm looking at how this edge of this foot lines up right there with the edge of the cutout for the feed dogs. That's another good place to look. And this foot is a little wiggly, making sure I have it on tight, but that actually looks pretty good. This is an aftermarket foot. So I would really like to try this with a actual Singer foot. So I'll have to pull one of those out. But if this were off or crooked, I would go ahead, put those quarters and the feeler gauges back under the presser foot, and then I would loosen that set screw and twist it a little bit to the right or left and tighten it back down, whichever way I needed to go. So that's it. You installed your feed dogs and you set the height. You installed your presser bar and you set the height of your presser bar. Hopefully it all went smoothly. If you have questions, please leave them for me in the comments below. One last note before you go, when your foot is up and you turn your hand wheel, your needle bar should not clash or collide with your foot at all. I know some people like them a little bit higher than 5/16 of an inch. Just if you decide to set it a little bit higher, run your hand wheel with the needle bar moving up and down while the presser foot is up, and make sure that this needle bar doesn't come into contact with your foot, and you'll be fine. So next, we're actually going to install the bobbin winding system and then get the cover back on the top so we can install the tension assembly after that and zero out our tension. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone is doing well. I'll see you again really soon. Bye.